Most royals make it a point to be dull, and then there's Sarah Ferguson. From Botox fillings and wild,
Popularly known as Fergie, touched on how the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are creating their own path as they raise their two young children.
Will Sarah Ferguson follow in Harry and Meghan's footsteps with a tell-all interview? Who is the mystery woman giving Prince...
It happened just after midnight, the kind of hour when most of Hollywood's asleep and the royal press machine hasn't even had its coffee yet. But somehow, the internet was already on fire, because Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York herself, had just done something absolutely wild. She dropped photos that nobody, and I mean nobody, was supposed to see. Pictures of Meghan Markle from way back on luxury yachts, surrounded by powerful people, and here's where it gets crazy. Prince Andrew right there with her. Not just in the background. Close. Like really close. Within minutes, Meghan's name was trending worldwide. Podcasts were scrambling to go live, and royal reporters who swore they were done for the day found themselves racing back to their cameras. But the person at the center of all this chaos, Meghan Markle, was reportedly in tears. She didn't see this coming. Not from Fergie. And what made this moment absolutely explosive wasn't just the photos themselves.
There is absolutely zero doubt in my mind. Rachel Meghan Markle was a semi-expensive yacht girl, and she knows it.
It was what they revealed about a chapter of Meghan's life that had somehow stayed hidden until now. Now, before we get into the full story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because what happens next is absolutely wild. Let's dive in. The first photo hit like a punch to the gut. Meghan laughing on the deck of some Mediterranean yacht, wind catching her hair, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, drink in hand. She's surrounded by what the tabloids like to call the international elite. You know, the type of people who summer in Monaco and winter in Dubai. The sort who don't just vacation, they retreat to their third or fourth home. Everything about the scene screamed luxury, excess, the lifestyle most people only see in movies or Instagram feeds they can't look away from. But here's the thing that made everyone's jaw drop. Prince Andrew was there too, not lurking in some corner of the frame, not photobombed in the background by accident.
But she's admitted to this now, made mistakes. But is she in the same position as him? I don't feel comfortable with that.
He was right there in the thick of it. Young, tan, and get this, noticeably close to Meghan. Uncomfortably close for two people who supposedly barely knew each other. The proximity that makes you do a double take and think, wait, how exactly did they know each other again? Now, if that first photo raised eyebrows, the second one absolutely detonated social media. In this shot, Meghan wasn't just socializing or posing for some casual group picture where everyone's smiling at the camera. She was standing beside Andrew, turned toward him, leaning in close, whispering something directly into his ear. Her hand was brushing his arm, not a quick accidental graze, but resting there with the ease and comfort that only comes from actual familiarity. The body language you don't have with strangers or acquaintances you've met once at a party. The body language experts came out of the woodwork immediately, and I mean immediately. Within an hour, there were threads breaking down every angle, every gesture.
Meghan Markle was just one of the working girls for Soho House. Call girl, working girl, escort, whatever you want to call it.
Every micro expression. Some people said it appeared harmless, just two people having a conversation at a crowded party. Nothing to see here. Others weren't buying that explanation for a second. They saw something more intimate, more deliberate in the way Meghan was positioned, in how relaxed and natural the interaction seemed. And then there were the ones who flat out claimed the whole thing suggested a much deeper connection that had been buried for years. Listen, the internet loves a mystery, and this was feeding that hunger like nothing else. Within hours, amateur detectives were zooming in on reflections in sunglasses, trying to spot other recognizable faces, analyzing shadows and light patterns to figure out the exact date and time of day. People were cross-referencing yacht registries to figure out who owned the boat, digging through old society pages and party reports from the Mediterranean social circuit.
Referring to Meghan Markle's Harper's Bazaar interview, and I'll explain what I mean. So in this article, the author...
Someone even claimed they could identify the specific champagne brand in Meghan's glass based on the bottle shape and label color. It was absolute madness. The viral frenzy that doesn't just trend for a few hours and fade away. It consumes everything. Dominating timelines, group chats, comment sections, every corner of the internet. The photos were being shared, screenshotted, reposted, memed, and analyzed from every possible angle. Commentary channels were pumping out emergency videos. Royal watchers who'd been quiet for months suddenly had content gold. Even people who'd never cared about Meghan or the royals before were getting sucked into the speculation because the images told such a compelling story, or at least seemed to. But the real question nobody could answer, the one that kept popping up in every thread and every comment section, was this. How did Meghan and Andrew even know each other back then? Think about it. She was an actress trying to make it in Hollywood, doing cable TV on a show most people hadn't heard of.
Sarah Ferguson is finally ready to reveal the truth. All of it. The truth about how she really met Meghan. The truth about
hustling for auditions, networking at industry events, living that grind every aspiring actor knows. He was, well, a prince with a very specific, very exclusive social circle. Their worlds shouldn't have overlapped, not naturally, not in any obvious way. Yet here they were, caught on camera, appearing way more familiar than anyone expected or could easily explain. It wasn't just that they were at the same party. Lots of celebrities and royals end up at the same events. It was how comfortable they seemed with each other, how natural and unforced the interaction appeared. That's what made people suspicious, made them start asking questions that didn't have easy answers. The photos didn't just show Meghan in a different light. They showed a whole side of her life, a whole chapter that had somehow never made it into any interview, any documentary, any carefully crafted tell-all moment. And Meghan had done plenty of those. She'd sat down for major interviews, shared her story multiple times.
When I enter, the house manager announces Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, even though we appear to be the only two people in there.
Talked about her journey, her struggles, her rise. But this era, these connections, this world of luxury yachts and powerful circles, crickets, nothing. It was like this part of her past had been edited out, scrubbed clean from the official narrative. And that's what really got people talking, what turned casual observers into invested followers of the story. It wasn't just about the photos themselves, it was about what they represented. Meghan had spent years controlling her narrative, shaping every detail of her public story with the precision of someone who understood exactly how image and perception worked. Every interview was strategic, every public appearance calculated, every statement worded just right. She'd built this image of herself as relatable, grounded, someone who'd worked hard and earned her place. But these images, they told a completely different tale, one she clearly never wanted the world to see.
Here's what makes this dangerous for Meghan. The Sussex brand is built on authenticity, on being truth tellers, on escaping.
They suggested access to exclusive circles, connections to powerful people, a lifestyle that contradicted the underdog narrative she'd spent so long cultivating. And once people saw that contrast, once they realized there was a whole chunk of her history that had been conveniently left out, the questions started flooding in. What else didn't we know? What other connections existed? And most importantly, why had this been hidden for so long? So why did Fergie do it? Why now, after all these years of keeping quiet, did she decide to blow everything up? Here's the thing. Sarah Ferguson had been sitting on the sidelines for decades, watching, waiting, biting her tongue while the world dragged her through the mud over and over again. Every time Prince Andrew got caught up in something messy, every scandal that hit the headlines, somehow Fergie's name got pulled into it too. Blamed by association, blamed by marriage, blamed by proximity.
The complaints from Harry usually were which room he was going to be assigned. He talks about how Balmoral he ended up in some tiny...
It didn't matter that they'd been divorced for decades. The connection was permanent in the public's mind, and she couldn't shake it no matter how hard she tried. And listen, Fergie tried everything. She did the charity work, the public appearances, the interviews, where she talked about personal growth and moving forward. She played the game exactly how the royal family wanted her to play it. Stay quiet, stay dignified, don't make waves. But behind the scenes, the frustration was building. Because while she was taking hit after hit, watching her reputation get shredded year after year, other people were getting free passes. Other people were rewriting their own histories, painting themselves as victims, conveniently leaving out the parts that didn't fit their polished public image. And that's where Meghan comes in. For years now, Meghan and Harry had been doing the interview circuit, telling their story, talking about how hard everything was, how unfair the system treated them, how they were the victims of a cruel institution. And look, some of that might be true. The royal family isn't exactly known for being warm and fuzzy.
For years, people have wondered how Meghan Markle entered the royal world so suddenly, so smoothly, and with such explosive.
But what really got under Fergie's skin was the selective storytelling. Meghan was painting this picture of herself as someone who walked into the royal world completely innocent, totally unprepared, blindsided by how brutal it all was. But Fergie knew different. She understood Meghan had been around powerful circles long before Harry came into the picture. She was aware of the yacht days, the connections to people like Andrew, the lifestyle that suggested Meghan understood exactly how these elite worlds operated. This wasn't some naive actress stumbling into royalty. This was someone who'd been networking in high-level circles for a while, someone who knew how to navigate power and privilege. And watching Meghan play the innocent card while simultaneously throwing the entire royal family under the bus, that was Fergie's breaking point. She'd kept her mouth shut about a lot of things over the years. She'd protected people, kept secrets, played by the rules even when those rules didn't protect her.
She's done it deliberately and very carefully. She's cunning.
Oh, guys, Meghan didn't just slip up.
But this felt different. This felt like watching someone get away with rewriting history while she was still paying for her own past mistakes. Mistakes that honestly seemed pretty tame compared to some of the stuff other people had gotten away with. So Fergie made a choice. She went into her personal archives, the photos she'd kept private for decades, and she pulled out the ones that told a different story about Meghan's past. Not to be cruel, not to destroy her, but to show the world that maybe things weren't as simple as Meghan wanted everyone to believe. That maybe there was more to the story than what was being fed to the public through strategically managed interviews and PR campaigns. And when she posted those photos, she didn't just drop them without comment. She added a caption, short, sharp, impossible to misinterpret. Some memories should never be rewritten. Boom. That wasn't vague. That wasn't diplomatic royal speak. That was Fergie drawing a line in the sand and saying,
from the outside, Meghan Markle built the perfect narrative, the innocent outsider, the misunderstood woman who only wanted love, the victim of—
enough is enough. No more letting people control stories that erased inconvenient truths. No more watching from the sidelines while others played victim and rewrote their histories. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, the post was everywhere. Screenshots flying across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, every platform you can think of. Royal commentators were scrambling to analyze what this meant. This Fergie acting alone, or did she have backing from other members of the family? Was this personal revenge, or was there something bigger going on? The speculation went into overdrive because this wasn't how things were supposed to work in the royal world. You didn't air dirty laundry. You didn't call people out publicly. You definitely didn't post receipts from someone's past and dare them to explain it. But Fergie didn't care about the rules anymore. She'd played by them for decades, and where had it gotten her? Still being blamed for things that weren't her fault, still being dragged into scandals she had nothing to do with.
I think that I've now, at 63 years old, suddenly owned that it's not a bad thing.
Still watching other people get sympathy and support while she got judgment. So she made the decision to step out of the shadows and into the arena, consequences be damned. And here's what made this move so powerful. Fergie wasn't some random gossip blogger or tabloid journalist who could be dismissed or discredited. She was a duchess, a former royal, someone who'd lived inside that world and understood how it worked. She had credibility, access, and most importantly, she had receipts. Real, undeniable photographic receipts that couldn't be explained away or spun into something else. This wasn't hearsay or rumors. This was documented history, captured on camera, impossible to deny. What Fergie understood, what she'd learned from spending time on the receiving end of public scrutiny, was that in the court of public opinion, perception is everything. And right now, Meghan's perception was meticulously controlled.
She lives with you. True. I should have actually, before you came on stage, said, like,
strategically managed, designed to generate sympathy and support. But those yacht photos, they didn't fit that image. They showed a different version of Meghan, one that raised uncomfortable questions about how much of her public story was actually true and how much was calculated presentation. Fergie realized that releasing these photos would create chaos. She understood Meghan's team would scramble, the media would explode, the internet would dissect every pixel. But she also recognized that once those images were out there, they couldn't be taken back. The questions they raised couldn't be unasked. The contrast between the Meghan in those photos and the Meghan in the polished interviews couldn't be ignored. And that was exactly what Fergie wanted. Not destruction, but accountability. Not revenge, but truth, or at least her version of it. Because after spending time being told to stay quiet, after watching others manipulate their stories, while she took the blame for everything, Fergie had finally decided it was time to speak.
The Duke of York, Andrew, is removed from all titles and duties for his links to...
And she wasn't speaking with words. She was speaking with pictures, the kind that really are worth 1,000 words, the kind that make people stop, look twice, and start asking questions they might not have asked before. And in doing that, she just changed the entire game. The moment those photos went live, Meghan's world imploded. Within 5 minutes, her name was the #1 trending topic in the UK. Within 10 minutes, it hit the US. Within half an hour, it dominated conversations everywhere. People cared about royal drama or just loved watching someone's carefully constructed image crack under pressure. The internet didn't just react, it detonated. Twitter became an absolute war zone. Instagram comment sections went nuclear. TikTok pumped out reaction videos faster than anyone could keep up. The takes were all over the place. On one side, Meghan's defenders came out swinging, arguing these were ancient photos, that she was just a young actress networking like anyone else.
The journalist shows up and knocks on the door, and some kind of house manager answers the door, and
they said it was invasion of privacy, a targeted smear campaign by those who'd never forgiven her for marrying Harry. But on the other side, the critics weren't buying it. They wanted answers. How exactly did Meghan know Prince Andrew back then? What was she doing on those yachts? Who invited her? And the biggest mystery, why had this entire chapter been completely scrubbed from every interview, every documentary, every conversation she'd ever had about her past? Because here's the thing, Meghan had talked about her journey constantly. Major interviews, stories about struggling as an actress, discussions about her family drama. She'd been incredibly open about certain aspects of her life. But the yacht era, the connections to Andrew and these exclusive circles, total silence. It was like someone had taken an eraser to that whole period and just wiped it clean. And now viewers were noticing that gap, and they weren't letting it slide. Comment sections were brutal. People pulled up old interviews pointing out how Meghan had positioned herself as this,
"Oh, you won't believe what's finally come to light. Sarah Ferguson, yes, the Duchess who's seen every scandal under the royal sun, is
outsider who didn't understand royal life, who was blindsided by the pressure." But these photos showed someone who'd been moving in elite circles for a while, someone who clearly knew how to operate in high-power environments way before she ever met Harry. Inside that Montecito mansion, sources said Meghan was absolutely losing it. Everything she'd spent time building, the image, the brand, the polished persona, was falling apart in real time. She was reportedly pacing, phone in hand, watching the disaster unfold, seeing her name attached to hashtags and headlines she never wanted to see. The emotional toll was immediate and intense. Sources said she cycled through everything. Fury at Fergie, panic about what else might come out, devastation that her control over her own narrative had been ripped away. She'd built her entire public identity on authenticity, on being genuine and relatable. But now millions were questioning whether any of that was actually true, whether the whole thing had been performance from the beginning.
Her man serves her no purpose. Does that sound familiar? Fergie saying, oh, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. Why? Because now she no longer has a...
And here's what made it worse. She couldn't fight back. The photos were authentic, undeniably authentic. She couldn't claim they were fake or photoshopped because they weren't. Any statement she made would just draw more attention, make viewers look closer, dig deeper into that era of her past. So she was stuck. Stay silent and let the public fill in the blanks, or speak up and risk making everything worse. It was a PR nightmare where every option felt wrong, where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Her team was in full crisis mode. Paralyzed by the scope of the problem, these were images that would live on the internet forever, referenced and reshared anytime someone wanted to challenge Meghan's version of her own history. They'd become a permanent record, a visual contradiction to the account she'd spent so long perfecting. And the worst part, this was just the beginning. Because if Fergie had these photos, what else did she have? What other moments were sitting in her archive waiting to be released?
The truth about the circles they both moved in long before Meghan married Harry, and most importantly, the truth about what tore their relationship.
The uncertainty was almost worse than the actual images themselves. This constant anxiety about what might drop next. The internet wasn't letting up. Every hour brought new analysis, new commentary, new memes, new theories. Amateur investigators were digging through old society pages, party photos, anything that might show Meghan in these elite circles. And every time someone found something, it added fuel to the fire. For someone like Meghan, who'd made control and image management central to her public life, this loss of control was probably unbearable. She couldn't delete the photos, couldn't stop the sharing, couldn't control the conversation. Her narrative had escaped her completely, and all she could do was watch it grow into something bigger than she could manage. This was her worst nightmare, the past she'd strategically left behind suddenly front and center, impossible to ignore, impossible to explain away. And somewhere in that Montecito mansion, Meghan was facing the reality that sometimes...
Now, Meghan, would you believe it, has been dubbed the Duchess of Delusion after, quote, a deeply uncool move.
No matter how deliberately you craft your account, the truth has a way of catching up. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn, because those two yacht photos that broke the internet, apparently they were just the tip of the iceberg. Within hours of Fergie's initial post, whispers started spreading through royal circles and media networks. And the whispers all said the same thing. Those photos weren't alone. They were part of something much bigger, something nobody had known existed until now. Fergie, it turned out, had been keeping a private collection, an archive. Photos, memories, moments from decades of moving in royal and elite circles, all cataloged and stored away. And apparently, a significant chunk of that archive involved Meghan's pre-Harry life. The yacht days, the parties, the connections to folks like Andrew, and other powerful figures. Nobody knew about this collection until those first images went live and the reality started sinking in. And once that information leaked, once viewers realized these weren't isolated photos.
Truth seeker or royal saboteur? Every royal household, no matter how polished or perfect,
but part of a larger set. The speculation went absolutely insane. How many more photos were there? What did they show? Were we talking about a handful of additional images or dozens, perhaps hundreds of moments captured from that era of Meghan's life? And more importantly, what was Fergie planning to do with them? Because here's what made everyone nervous. Fergie had shown she was willing to release this material. She'd crossed that line, broken that unspoken rule about former royals protecting each other's secrets. The first release had already caused massive damage to Meghan's managed image. What would a second wave do? Or a third? How much more would come out before Meghan's entire public persona collapsed under the weight of contradictions? Inside Meghan's camp, this realization reportedly triggered a whole new level of panic. It was one thing to deal with two photos, two moments frozen in time that perhaps could be explained or eventually moved past.
You see that? That's Meghan Markle with her Panama hat standing right next to him. When Sarah Ferguson...
But an entire archive? That was a different beast entirely. That meant Fergie had documentation of multiple events, multiple interactions, multiple situations that Meghan had spent time keeping out of the public eye. The uncertainty was torture. Not understanding what else was out there, not anticipating when the next release would come, not grasping how bad the next batch of photos would be. Each day became a waiting game. Is this it? Is this the next wave? What's she releasing now? And Fergie, for her part, stayed conspicuously quiet after that initial post. No follow-up photos, no additional commentary, no interviews. Just silence. Strategic, calculated silence that somehow felt more threatening than any statement would have been. Because the silence left room for imagination, left everyone wondering what was coming next and when it would drop. The media went into a feeding frenzy, trying to figure out what this archive contained.
There is a story whispered in royal circles. A story that says Meghan Markle's rise into the royal world did not begin with a...
Some claimed she'd been documenting everything for a while, keeping records of parties and events as a way to safeguard herself, ensuring her version of history stayed intact if anyone tried to rewrite it. Others suggested the archive was more personal, just memories she'd held on to until Meghan's recent behavior pushed her to weaponize them. Whatever the motivation, the effect was the same. Meghan was now living under the shadow of an unknown threat, an archive she couldn't see, couldn't control, couldn't predict. It was like having a sword hanging over her head, never understanding when or if it would drop, but recognizing that if it did, the damage would be catastrophic. Her advisors were reportedly going through scenarios, trying to prepare for what came next. If photos from this party surface, we say this. If images from that yacht trip appear, we respond with that. They were essentially trying to build contingency plans for situations they couldn't see.
This, the Duchess of Delusion, and being deeply uncool by a royal commentator. There's lots of those, aren't they? Not as good as...
Coming, couldn't predict, couldn't adequately prepare for, because they didn't know what material Fergie actually had. And the public, watching all of this unfold, was absolutely eating it up. The mystery of the archive became its own story, separate from the photos themselves. Speculation ran wild about what else was hidden in Fergie's collection. Were there photos with other controversial figures? Were there images that showed even closer interactions with Andrew? For Meghan, this wasn't just about reputation management anymore. This was about survival. Because if enough photos came out, if enough moments from that era surfaced, it wouldn't matter how much charitable work she did or how many polished statements her team released. The contrast between her public image and her documented past would become impossible to reconcile. And the question that nobody answered, the one that hung over everything like a dark cloud, was simple but terrifying. What else does Fergie have?
It's excruciating to live with past mistakes. It is so difficult. I always would like to change so many things in my past, but I can't.
That question became a hashtag, became a meme, became the central obsession of everyone following this story. Because until that question got answered, Meghan would be living in perpetual anxiety, waiting for the other shoe to drop, never recognizing when Fergie would decide to release the next piece of her hidden past. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. Fergie held all the cards now, had all the leverage, controlled the timing and the narrative in a way that Meghan couldn't counter or predict. And that powerlessness, that total loss of control, was probably more devastating than the photos themselves, because Meghan had built her entire post-royal life on controlling her story. But now someone else held the pen, held the photos, held the power to reshape that narrative whenever they chose. And there wasn't a thing she did about it except wait and wonder and worry about what was coming next. While the public watched this drama unfold on their screens behind the scenes at Meghan's team headquarters,
sources say Meghan began distancing herself, not slowly but sharply. She created a gap between herself and the York sisters.
It was absolute pandemonium, the kind of crisis that PR professionals have nightmares about, where everything's happening at once and there's no clear path forward, no obvious solution that doesn't create 10 new problems. This wasn't a situation they trained for or prepared for, because honestly, who prepares for a former duchess dropping photo receipts from your client's hidden past? The palace, for its part, was doing what the palace does best. watching, observing, taking careful mental notes while maintaining that signature royal composure that makes them look unshakable no matter what chaos erupts around them. They weren't issuing statements, weren't jumping into the fray, weren't taking sides publicly. But make no mistake, they were paying attention to everything. Each photo release, each social media trend, each shift in public opinion was being monitored, analyzed, cataloged by advisors who'd spent their careers managing royal image and reputation. And what they were seeing wasn't good for Meghan.
Well. If it isn't two snakes fighting, because Meghan Markle's past is true.
The photos were doing exactly what Fergie probably hoped they'd do, raising questions, creating doubt, chipping away at the foundation of trust Meghan had tried to build with the public. Because trust is everything when you're a public figure, especially when you've positioned yourself as authentic and transparent. And these photos suggested there was a whole side of her authenticity that had been conveniently left out of the conversation. Back in Meghan's camp, the sessions were getting intense. Her team had brought in everyone: PR specialists, media consultants, crisis management experts, professionals who'd handled scandals for celebrities and high-profile figures, speakers who'd needed to rebuild a damaged image, and they were all sitting around attempting to figure out the impossible. How do you respond to something like this without making it worse? How do you address photos that are undeniably real without validating all the speculation and conspiracy theories swirling around them?
Now, let's talk about Fergie, if we can call her that. And we know that despite all the scandals and scams, she's always managed to...
The first challenge was figuring out what kind of response to make, if any. Some advisors pushed for a direct acknowledgement, something that recognized the photos but provided context, explained the circumstances, humanized the situation. Others argued that any public comment just drew more attention to the images, kept the story alive longer, gave media outlets fresh angles to cover. The disagreement was fierce because both sides had valid points, and the stakes were astronomical. Then there was the tone problem. If they went too defensive, it looked like Meghan had something to hide, like the photos revealed worse than what viewers were already imagining. If they went too dismissive, it seemed arrogant, out of touch, like she didn't care that folks felt misled or confused about her past. Finding that sweet spot between acknowledging concern and not feeding the fire was proving nearly impossible. Draft responses were written and rewritten dozens of times. Words were scrutinized, sentences restructured.
What if Meghan Markle's real royal scandal isn't what she said, but what she desperately tried to hide at 60?
Entire paragraphs scrapped and started over. Too apologetic made her look weak. Too confident made her look callous. Too detailed invited more questions. Too vague seemed evasive. It was a linguistic tightrope walk where one wrong word choice sent everything tumbling down. Meanwhile, Fergie's approach was working perfectly. By releasing just enough to create chaos, but not everything at once, she'd put Meghan in a position where responding was almost impossible. Because how do you craft a comprehensive reply when you don't know what else is coming? Any public comment Meghan made today could be contradicted by a photo Fergie released tomorrow. It was brilliant positioning, keeping her opponent constantly off balance, never able to get solid footing. The palace, still observing from their dignified distance, had their own plan playing out. While Meghan's world was imploding, they were quietly highlighting other royal activities: charity events, hospital visits, public engagements with William and Catherine.
That's why Fergie's voice is so dangerous. She can trace it all from the beginning. Meghan didn't just stumble into royalty. She was ushered toward it.
Ceremonial duties that reminded the public what the monarchy was really about. It was subtle, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, but incredibly effective. The contrast was stark: Meghan in crisis and chaos, the core royals calm and carrying on with duty and service. This wasn't accidental. Palace communications teams had been managing royal image for centuries, and they understood something fundamental. When one part of the royal universe is creating negative headlines, You don't fight it directly. You simply remind audiences of the positive elements elsewhere. Let the chaos burn itself out while demonstrating that the institution remains steady, unchanged, focused on its purpose. For Meghan's advisors, watching this play out was frustrating. They were fighting tooth and nail to contain damage while the palace casually demonstrated how irrelevant the whole situation was to the actual functioning of the monarchy. It was a masterclass in institutional power, showing that individual scandals come and go.
Sources claim Harry's own friend knew too much about Meghan from years earlier. Fergie supposedly knows the full story behind why Meghan did not.
But the crown endures. And that message was being received loud and clear by the public. Inside the crisis room, another problem emerged: social media. The platforms were absolutely flooded with commentary, memes, hot takes, analysis videos, reaction posts, everything you can imagine. And Meghan's team had no control over any of it. They'd spent time building her social media presence, cultivating her online image, but now that same digital landscape had turned into hostile territory. Managing the conversation was like holding water in your hands, impossible and exhausting. Some suggested a coordinated social media campaign, flooding platforms with positive content about Meghan's charitable work, her advocacy, her accomplishments. But others warned that this looked too orchestrated, too desperate, like they were burying the yacht photos under an avalanche of PR content. And viewers saw right through it, called it out, mocked the attempt to manipulate the narrative. The internet had developed a pretty sharp nose for inauthentic image management.
About her relationship with him, saying, look, he was a wonderful friend, and how he basically lent her lots of money.
Then there was the question of allies. Who in Meghan's circle publicly defended her? Who had the credibility and the willingness to put their own reputation on the line to vouch for her character despite these photos? The list was shorter than her team hoped. Some friends and supporters were staying conspicuously silent, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire, not wanting to attach themselves to a story that was still developing and could get worse. The few who did speak up found themselves immediately attacked online, questioned about their own connections to Meghan, accused of being paid defenders or just blind loyalists. It was brutal, and it had a chilling effect. Even those who genuinely cared about Meghan had to think twice before stepping into the ring, because defending her meant inviting scrutiny and criticism onto themselves. As days passed, the pressure was taking a visible toll. Sources close to Meghan described someone who was sleeping poorly, eating irregularly, obsessively checking news alerts and social media trends.
Only perception survives. Soon, old photos began resurfacing. Grainy shots from luxury boats, unidentified.
The woman who'd always been so controlled, so composed in public, was struggling to maintain that composure behind closed doors. The weight of recognizing that Fergie had more material, that another release was hanging over her head, was crushing. Her advisors focused on what they did control: future appearances, upcoming projects, opportunities to reshape the narrative over time. But it all felt hollow when nobody knew what dropped tomorrow. Planning ahead was nearly impossible when the past kept exploding into the present without warning. The uncertainty was paralyzing, making even basic decisions feel risky and potentially disastrous. And through it all, one truth became increasingly clear. This wasn't just a PR crisis. This was an existential threat to everything Meghan had built post-royalty. Her entire brand, her credibility, her ability to be taken seriously as an advocate and public figure, all of it rested on a foundation that Fergie's photos had cracked. And if more photos came...
Our old friends, we met first more than 30 years. Least surprising thing I've heard today.
If the archive kept releasing new material, that foundation wouldn't just crack. It crumbled entirely, and there wasn't any way to rebuild it. Here's the thing about those yacht photos that nobody could stop talking about. They weren't just embarrassing or inconvenient for Meghan. They fundamentally clashed with everything she'd spent years building. And the public noticed that disconnect in a big way. Because when you've crafted this entire identity around being relatable, grounded, a person who worked her way up from humble beginnings, and then photos surface of you lounging on luxury yachts with royalty and billionaires, well, the math doesn't exactly add up in anyone's mind. The images showed a version of Meghan that felt completely alien to the persona she'd been projecting. This wasn't wasn't the struggling actress hustling for auditions and working cable TV gigs. This displayed someone who had access to the most exclusive social circles on the planet.
For years, people have wondered how Meghan Markle entered the royal world so suddenly, so smoothly, and with such explosive impact.
Someone comfortable navigating wealth and power at the highest levels. The woman in those photos looked like she belonged in that world, like she'd been moving through those spaces with ease and familiarity for quite some time. And that's what made the contrast so jarring. Meghan had given interviews where she talked about feeling like an outsider, about not understanding royal protocols, about being overwhelmed by the formality and the expectations. She'd painted this picture of a person who got thrown into a world she didn't know how to navigate. But these photos told a completely different tale. They suggested someone who'd already been swimming in elite waters long before she ever met Harry. Someone who knew exactly how these circles operated. Social media absolutely exploded with this realization. The takes came in hot from every direction. Body language experts returned, analyzing every photo from new angles, pointing out details viewers had missed on first viewing.
Sarah Ferguson is finally ready to reveal the truth. All of it. The truth about how she really met Meghan. The truth about the private...
The way Meghan held herself, the confidence in her posture, the ease with which she interacted with others in those photos, none of it matched up with her narrative of the uncertain outsider she'd been selling. Fashion analysts jumped in too, breaking down her outfits in the photos, the designer pieces, the expensive accessories, the kind of wardrobe that doesn't come from an actress working cable TV. Even makeup and styling experts weighed in, noting the polished, professional look that suggested regular access to high-end beauty services. Every detail got scrutinized, and every detail seemed to clash with the underdog account Meghan had been telling. The comment sections turned absolutely ruthless, thousands posting side-by-side comparisons, taking screenshots from Meghan's interviews and placing them next to the yacht photos, highlighting the inconsistencies. On one side, quotes about struggling and feeling lost. On the other side, images of luxury and privilege and comfort in exclusive spaces.
There is a story whispered in royal circles. A story that says Meghan Markle's rise into the royal world did not begin with a...
The visual proof hit harder than words alone could ever manage. Meghan's team launched their counteroffensive, and you could see them working overtime on social media. Suddenly, there came this flood of content highlighting her charitable work, her advocacy for women's rights, her speaking engagements at global forums, photos of her visiting schools, working with nonprofits, speaking at UN events. The message seemed clear. Look at all the good she's doing. Look at her impact. Look at her dedication to important causes. But here's the problem with that approach. The internet isn't easily distracted. Folks can hold two thoughts at once. They can acknowledge someone does charity work while also questioning the authenticity of their public image. And in this case, the yacht photos had created such a massive crack in Meghan's credibility that no amount of charity event photos could fully patch it over. The damage ran too deep, the questions loomed too big, the mismatch felt too obvious. Instagram and TikTok became battlegrounds. Meghan's supporters defended her, arguing that everyone networks, everyone tries to get ahead.
Soho House. This was not just a place to drink coffee or attend events. According to insiders, Soho House acted like a gate.
Everyone puts their best foot forward in their career. They said judging her for being ambitious or strategic seemed unfair. That plenty of successful individuals had done the same thing. And honestly, those defenders had a point. The issue wasn't that Meghan had been ambitious or strategic. The issue lay in how she'd spent years denying that part of her history, pretending it didn't exist, building an image that conveniently left out this entire chapter. The critics weren't letting up, though. They kept pointing out instance after instance where Meghan had positioned herself as someone who didn't understand elite culture, who felt shocked by wealth and formality, felt out of place in royal circles. And then they'd put those claims right next to photos of her clearly comfortable at high society events years before meeting Harry. The disconnect, real or perceived, fueled the fire. Audiences felt misled, manipulated like they'd been sold an account that only told half the truth. Commentary channels on YouTube had a field day.
Completely and utterly. I mean, really, it's like walking with a legend, an icon. But the whole nation loved
20-minute, 30-minute, hour-long breakdowns of the photos, the timeline, the inconsistencies in Meghan's various interviews over the years. Some of these videos got millions of views, becoming their own news cycles, adding fuel to an already out-of-control fire. The algorithm loved the drama, kept pushing the content to more and more viewers, ensuring the discussion had legs for weeks, maybe months. Royal watchers, the ones who'd been following these narratives for decades, started connecting dots that casual observers had missed. They dug up old society pages, found mentions of Meghan at various high-profile events years ago, discovered photos from parties and gatherings that had been public but largely forgotten. Each new discovery added another piece to the puzzle, and the picture it formed wasn't flattering. Meghan's team kept trying different tactics. They had friendly media outlets write sympathetic pieces, framing the yacht photos as ancient history, irrelevant to who she'd become. They emphasized her growth, her evolution, her journey from those days to becoming a mother and advocate.
And not with a press release, nor a scandalous tabloid leak, but with a sudden cancellation. King Charles III had quietly...
But those pieces got drowned out by the sheer volume of critical commentary. The hashtags, the trending topics, the memes that kept the yacht drama front and center in public consciousness. The memes turned particularly brutal, creative, funny, cutting. They spread like wildfire across every platform. Some showed Meghan in the yacht photos with captions mocking her claims of being an outsider. Others did before and after comparisons that highlighted the inconsistencies. The internet had turned her image management problem into entertainment, and once something becomes a meme, it's almost impossible to kill. It takes on a life of its own, gets shared and reshared, mutates into new versions, stays alive in collective memory long after the original news cycle has moved on. Television coverage wasn't much better. Morning shows, daytime talk shows, late-night programs, everyone discussed the photos and what they meant. Some hosts tried to be balanced, presenting both sides.
Enthusiast alongside the Queen. The possibility of going wrong seemed far-fetched.
Others leaned into the controversy, making jokes, expressing shock, questioning Meghan's credibility directly. The discussion had penetrated mainstream consciousness so completely that even those who normally didn't care about royal drama had opinions about it. For Meghan, watching this unfold must have felt like torture. Everything she'd worked to build, the brand, the image, the meticulously constructed public identity, got picked apart in real time by millions. And there wasn't anything she could do to stop it. Every attempt to redirect the conversation, to shift focus to her positive work, got swallowed up by the ongoing fascination with the yacht photos and what they revealed about the gap between her public persona and her actual history. The worst part? Probably the permanence of it all. These photos weren't going anywhere. They'd been saved, archived, backed up on thousands of devices. Years from now, anyone researching Meghan would find these images, would read about this controversy, would see the receipts that clashed with her polished narrative.
William has nothing in his past connected to her, nothing she can expose and nothing she can threaten. He stands firm, unmoved.
This wasn't a scandal that would fade with time. This became the kind of thing that becomes part of a permanent record, a footnote in the biography that never quite goes away, no matter what else gets accomplished. And still, the question hung in the air, unanswered and terrifying. If these photos caused this much damage, what would happen if Fergie released more? How much worse could it get? How many more inconsistencies sat in that archive, waiting to surface? The uncertainty formed its own kind of torture, keeping Meghan and her team in a constant state of anxiety, never knowing when the next bomb would drop or how devastating it would be when it did. By this point, weeks had passed since Fergie dropped those first photos, and the situation wasn't improving for Meghan. If anything, it kept getting worse, because the discussion had evolved beyond just the yacht pictures themselves. It had become bigger, more complicated. Now it centered on trust, authenticity, and whether anyone believed anything Meghan said about her past.
He's said to have nothing to hide, nothing she can use. William stands firm, calm, defiant, unbothered. But Meghan? Meghan has everything to lose. And that's why...
The photos had opened a door that wouldn't close, and viewers kept walking through it. questioning everything. The emotional weight of this whole situation started to show. Sources close to Meghan painted a picture of someone barely holding it together. Sleep didn't come easy anymore. Meals got skipped. Each notification on her phone sent a jolt of anxiety through her system, because who knew if it brought news of another photo drop, another wave of criticism, another viral moment at her expense. The woman who'd always seemed so put together, so controlled, so ready for the cameras, crumbled behind the scenes. Her circle of friends and advisors reportedly watched this deterioration with growing concern. They'd seen Meghan handle criticism before, watched her weather tabloid storms and online hate, but this felt different. This wasn't just mean comments or unflattering headlines. This involved her entire foundation being questioned, her credibility being dismantled piece by piece.
I think that I've now, at 63 years old, suddenly owned that it's not a bad thing to speak your voice.
And there seemed no clear end in sight, no moment where they'd say, okay, we've gotten through the worst of it. The exhaustion wasn't just emotional, it turned strategic too. Her team ran on adrenaline for weeks, constantly monitoring social media, tracking news coverage, preparing responses that never got used, drafting statements that never saw the light of day. Each day brought new decisions about how to handle the latest development, and each decision felt impossible. Do we address this new hashtag? Do we ignore that commentary video? Do we respond to this celebrity who just weighed in? The questions never stopped coming, and the public fascination with the narrative showed no signs of dying down. If anything, it took on new life as folks dug deeper, found more connections, pieced together more of Meghan's pre-Harry timeline. Each old photo that surfaced, each mention in society columns from years ago, each connection to wealthy or powerful figures, it all got added to this growing account about who Meghan really appeared to be.
And Sarah Ferguson were one of the highest profile royal couples ever when Andrew proposed in Scotland at Florence.
Versus who she'd claimed to be. Talk shows still discussed it. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to it. Royal commentary channels built their content strategies around it. The yacht photos had become an industry unto themselves, generating views, clicks, engagement, revenue for anyone smart enough to capitalize on the public's appetite for this drama. And that appetite seemed insatiable. Audiences couldn't get enough of analyzing, debating, discussing all angles of the narrative. For Meghan, watching her name become synonymous with this controversy must have been devastating. She'd worked so hard to build a brand around authenticity, compassion, advocacy for important causes. But now, when viewers heard her name, the first thing many thought of wasn't her charity work or her speeches about women's empowerment. It led to those yacht photos. It brought up the questions about her past. It sparked the debate about whether she'd been honest about her journey. The shift in public perception appeared dramatic and seemed irreversible.
In the ever-evolving saga surrounding Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, a new controversy has emerged, pitting her against the enigmatic...
Before the photos dropped, Meghan maintained defenders and critics, sure, but she also held credibility with a significant portion of the population. Individuals who believed her account, supported her choices, admired her courage in leaving royal life and speaking her truth. But the yacht photos shook that foundation for many of those supporters. Some stuck with her, arguing the photos didn't change anything, but others pulled back, uncertain now about what to believe. Social media sentiment analysis, the kind that PR teams obsess over, showed the shift in real numbers. Mentions of Meghan's name turned increasingly negative. Positive engagement dropped. Neutral observers became critics. The carefully built coalition of support fragmented and daily brought new defections. New voices expressing doubt. New former supporters saying they felt betrayed or misled. Celebrity allies started going quiet too. Those who'd previously spoken up for Meghan, defended her against criticism.
Meghan Markle's fabulous life leaves many of us green with envy, but now there's some hubbub about a
amplified her message. Many of them went silent when the yacht photos hit. Some probably didn't want to attach themselves to controversy. Others genuinely felt conflicted, unsure how to reconcile the Meghan they thought they knew with the one in those photos. Whatever the reason, the silence proved deafening and incredibly isolating for someone used to having vocal supporters. The brands and organizations Meghan partnered with started getting nervous. Being associated with controversy is one thing. Brands can weather that. But being associated with questions about authenticity and credibility, that's different. That's the kind of thing that makes corporate executives start having quiet conversations about whether the relationship still serves their interests. No partnerships got publicly canceled, but the enthusiasm seemed to cool. The collaborations became less visible. The promotional pushes less aggressive. Behind closed doors, Meghan's advisors engaged in difficult conversations about the path forward.
Don't try and trick me now because I'm not going to play this game. Delete that bit. John, can you delete it, please?
No Duchess, no titles, brand.
Some argued for a major interview, an opportunity where Meghan addressed things head-on, explained the yacht era, provided context, humanized herself, perhaps even admitted mistakes or acknowledged that her previous account had been incomplete. Others thought that too risky, that any extended discussion of the photos just gave them more oxygen, kept the discussion alive longer, provided more material for critics to dissect and attack. The debate got heated because the stakes rose higher than ever. Choose the wrong approach now and the damage becomes permanent. Choose right, and perhaps there remained a path to rehabilitation, to rebuilding trust, to moving past this chapter. But nobody agreed on what the right move actually looked like, because all options seemed to have massive downsides and uncertain benefits. Meanwhile, life went on. Meghan still faced obligations, appearances, projects that had been planned long before the yacht photos surfaced.
There is a story whispered in royal circles. A story that says Meghan Markle's rise into the royal world did not begin with a...
But all public outings became ordeals. Cameras watching for any sign of distress. Reporters shouting questions about the photos. Social media analyzing each outfit choice, each expression, each word she said, looking for clues about her mental state or hidden meanings in her comments. The pressure of maintaining composure in public while falling apart in private took its toll. Friends and sources described someone struggling to recognize herself anymore, feeling like her identity got hijacked by this controversy. The Meghan in those yacht photos felt like a different person from a different lifetime, but now that person dominated all conversation, and the Meghan of today couldn't escape her shadow. What made it even harder? The not knowing. Fergie still hadn't said whether she possessed more photos or what her endgame looked like. That uncertainty hung over things like a dark cloud. Daily Meghan woke up not knowing if today brought another batch of photos. Each time she started to feel like perhaps the worst had passed.
For Meghan's new holiday special, and they spotted this dress, and they're eagle-eyed, they're internet sleuthing.
There came this nagging fear that the rug would get pulled out from under her again at any moment. The lack of influence proved probably the most torturous part of all of this. Meghan had built her post-royal life on managing her narrative, being the author of her own account, deciding what to share and what to keep private. But Fergie had taken that power away completely. Now someone else held the ability to define Meghan's past, to release information on their timeline, to shape public perception in ways Meghan couldn't predict or prevent. And as weeks turned into a month, then longer, a sobering reality set in. This wasn't going away. The yacht photos, the questions they raised, the damage they'd done to her credibility, all of it became a permanent part of Meghan's narrative. Years from now, decades from now, when audiences looked back at her life and career, this chapter would be there. Not as a footnote, but as a defining moment. The time when the carefully constructed account cracked.
Moments the public never saw. The truth about the circles they both moved in long before Meghan married Harry, and
the public got a glimpse of a past she'd tried to keep hidden. For someone who'd spent so much energy managing her image, directing her narrative, protecting her privacy on her own terms, this loss of authority represented more than just a PR crisis. It turned personal. It felt painful. And it proved permanent. The woman in those yacht photos couldn't be erased or explained away. She existed in documentation that would outlive any statement, any interview, through any attempt to reframe the discussion. And Meghan needed to find a way to live with that reality, to move forward knowing that this version of her past now belonged to public property, available for anyone to see, interpret, and judge. So where does all of this leave us? Well, here we are, however many weeks or months later, and the dust still hasn't really settled. The yacht photos that Fergie dropped aren't going anywhere. They're out there, permanently archived on the internet, saved on countless devices.
To me, she is more dangerous than anybody.
Many people in this world are lost. It's excruciating to live with.
Referenced in articles and videos that will exist for years to come. And the questions they raised about Meghan's past, about her authenticity, about the gaps in her carefully told account, those questions aren't disappearing either. For Meghan, this whole situation has fundamentally changed the game. Before those photos surfaced, she had authority over her public image. She decided what parts of her past to share, what to emphasize, what to leave out. She crafted a persona that worked for her, that garnered sympathy and support, that positioned her as someone who'd overcome obstacles and challenged an unfair system. But Fergie took that power away in the most public way possible. And once you lose command of your own tale like that, getting it back is incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible. The impact goes beyond just public perception too. This has affected how viewers see everything Meghan says going forward.
So, you know, they're a bit, they could be worried about the smell themselves. And certainly,
They don't live there anymore, do they?
yeah.
When someone's credibility takes a hit this big, it colors all future statements, all future claims, all future attempts to shape how they're seen. There's always going to be this voice in the back of minds asking, but what's the full picture? What's being left out this time? What photos or information will surface later that contradicts what we're being told now? And that's likely the most lasting damage from all of this. It's not just about those specific yacht photos or that specific era of Meghan's life. It's about trust. Once audiences start questioning whether they believe what someone tells them about their past, that skepticism doesn't just go away. It becomes part of how they process everything that person does or says. It's like a filter that gets applied to all future information, making folks more critical, more suspicious, less willing to give the benefit of the doubt. Fergie, for her part, achieved exactly what she set out to do. But before we get into what Fergie knows, she showed that there was another side to Meghan's experience, one that had been conveniently left out of all those interviews and documentaries. She demonstrated that the account Meghan had been selling wasn't complete, that there were chapters and connections and experiences that didn't fit the image being projected. And she did it in a way that wouldn't be ignored or easily dismissed, with actual photos, real documentation, visual receipts that raised questions Meghan couldn't comfortably answer. The palace, watching all of this unfold from their careful distance, learned something valuable too. They saw how quickly public opinion shifts when contradictions emerge, how fragile carefully managed images become, how documentation from the past resurfaces and reshapes present perception. And they saw that sometimes the best approach is just to stay quiet, to let chaos burn itself out while maintaining steady focus on duty and service.
Markle was known as a hardcore yacht partying person, ready for anything.
While Meghan has spent years trying to build an image of elegance.
The contrast between Meghan's turmoil and the palace's calm composure wasn't accidental. It was strategic, and it worked. But here's the thing that makes this whole situation particularly complicated. The yacht photos and the questions they raised, they don't make Meghan a villain. They don't erase the legitimate criticisms she's had about royal life or media or the treatment she received. What they do is complicate her tale, add nuance, show that things weren't as simple as the underdog versus establishment framing that had been presented. And that complexity is uncomfortable for everyone because it means letting go of neat, clean accounts and accepting that the truth is usually messier than we want it to be. For viewers who followed this whole saga, the takeaway centers on the nature of public figures and image management in general. Everyone in the public eye is crafting a public face to some degree, choosing what to share and what to keep private, emphasizing certain aspects of their life while downplaying others.
Major updates about Meghan Markle's hidden connections. In a surprising revelation, Harry, the Duke of Sussex...
That's not inherently wrong or deceptive, it's just how public life works. But when the gaps between the presented image and the full reality become too large, when information surfaces that fundamentally contradicts what's being told, that's when trust breaks down. And rebuilding that trust is incredibly hard. Looking ahead, Meghan faces a choice. She continues managing her public image, emphasizing her charitable work and advocacy, and hoping that eventually the yacht photos fade from public consciousness. Or she addresses the contradictions head on, acknowledges that her previous telling was incomplete, provides more context and nuance. Both approaches have risks. Staying silent lets the questions linger forever. Speaking up just draws more attention to the very things she'd rather audiences forget. What we do know is that this chapter isn't really over. Fergie still hasn't confirmed whether she has more material in that archive, or whether the 2 yacht photos were all she planned to release.
It had all started so well. A strong character, she was one of the most influential women to become Duchess of York.
That uncertainty hangs over everything, keeping Meghan in a state of not knowing when or if another wave comes. And that psychological weight, that constant anxiety about what surfaces next, that's its own kind of ongoing crisis, even if no new photos ever appear. The broader lesson here, the one that extends beyond just Meghan and Fergie and royal drama, is about the permanence of the digital age. Photos taken decades ago resurface at any moment. Past connections and experiences that seemed private or forgotten suddenly become public knowledge. And once something is out there on the internet, it's essentially permanent. You don't take it back, don't delete it, don't manage how it gets interpreted or shared or used to question your current image. For anyone building a public presence, cultivating a brand, telling their tale to the world, this serves as a reminder that authenticity matters. Not because being authentic is some moral imperative, but because the gaps and contradictions will eventually surface.
You guys, so Meghan has covered Harper's Bazaar. Did you see this?
Yes, yeah.
So I read the article.
Someone out there has photos, has information, has memories that don't match what's being told. And in an age where everyone has a smartphone and social media platform, those contradictions go viral in minutes and reshape public perception overnight. So what's the final word on all of this? Perhaps it's that authority is an illusion. You manage your image, craft your public face, present yourself however you want, but you don't decide what information exists out there or when it surfaces. You don't determine how audiences interpret that information or what conclusions they draw. And you definitely don't decide whether someone like Fergie chooses one day that enough is enough and releases material that contradicts what you've been saying. Meghan's yacht photos became more than just a scandal. They became a case study in image management, reputation direction, and the collision between curated public personas and complicated private histories. They showed that no matter how carefully you craft your tale, the past has a way of catching up.
Soho House, the private club where celebrities, creatives, and the wealthy all mix, but one name.
And when it does, when those photos or that information surfaces at the worst possible moment, all you do is deal with the fallout and hope that eventually, somehow, you move forward. But moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. Those photos will always be there, the questions will always linger, and the crack in Meghan's credibility, the one that started with a late-night post from Fergie, that's permanent. It's part of her biography now, part of her legacy, part of how she'll be remembered. Not the only part, sure, but a significant one that won't be erased or explained away, no matter how many charitable initiatives she launches or how many powerful speeches she gives. And that's the most sobering realization of all, that sometimes, no matter how hard you work to direct your public image, to present yourself a certain way, to build a brand and identity, it all comes crashing down because of photos from a lifetime ago that you hoped nobody would ever see.
Someone dropped a fork. For a moment, nobody moved.
Meghan Markle was introduced by Sarah Ferguson to Prince Harry.
They all...
That's the risk of public life in the digital age. Nothing stays hidden forever. And when the truth comes out, or even just a different version of the truth, the consequences become devastating and permanent. So here we are at the end of this wild ride, with Meghan still dealing with the fallout, Fergie having made her point, and the rest of us watching and wondering what comes next. The tale continues, but the lesson is already clear. Your past is never as buried as you think it is. And in the court of public opinion, opinion, once credibility is damaged, it's almost impossible to fully repair. The yacht photos proved that. And Meghan, whether she likes it or not, will be living with that reality for a very long time. What do you think? Was Fergie justified, or did she go too far? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.